Hi everyone, Bruce Swartz here. Welcome to the Darkside podcast, and you're going to see why I call it the Darkside podcast when I start talking about spiritual encounters that I've encountered throughout my life. I've seen through many doorways, and as I get older, and now doing the research I'm doing, I'm thinking more that what I thought were ghosts and spirits when I was younger, I had never ever thought that maybe it could be aliens, especially not at a young age, even though I did know a little bit, or that actually didn't know anything about aliens, but I talked about it like most kids will after seeing a movie or something. But the fascination for me about stars came at a very, very young age. When I was 6.5, I did lose my father and also my grandfather, probably in the same month or around the same time. And there was something that my dad told me, and particularly about where my grandfather was and where I'd be able to speak to him, right? And it was on a star. And it just so happens it was the Northern Star. I didn't know it was the Northern Star, but my mother told me a couple of days ago, she goes, yes, it was the Northern Star that he said. She goes, it's odd that he said that right before he died. But in reality, with the work that I'm doing today, actually filming stars and the moon and UFOs and my studies in ufology and in astronomy, you can't help but wonder, I can't help but wonder if the whole timeline of someone's life, if it's not already written. I believe it was already written, our path, but that we can change that path. Not necessarily changing the outcome, but the way to get there. There are more than one road to Rome. Now, there's that expression. No matter how many roads you take, it'll either take longer time or shorter time, but you're still going to get to your same destination. So going back to the star story, what happens is, and I'll go back to when I was 4.5 too, because lots happened. When I was young, that a good thing my mother told me about, if not I wouldn't have even known about me astral traveling. And listen, astral travel, even at the time that I was telling my mother what I was doing when I was 4.5 years old, she wasn't familiar with astral travel either. Don't forget, no internet, unless you're reading a book or know someone that's into astral travel or astrology, you're probably not going to know much about it. Everything that I'm telling you in this podcast is absolutely real. It happened, and I'm not confused or mixed up or have any loss of memory of what happened, and what I'm going to tell you is definitely real. So my dad tells me to look up at a star, to look for my grandfather. And obviously when my dad died not long after, still fresh in my head. I mean, he died, we were fresh coming back from the camping vacation. It was summer vacation. So after his death, I had to go to the school. It was buried across from the school too. You have no idea. I mean, it was hard. It was really hard. But because of that, here's the funny twist. I became so strong-willed, and nothing could affect me at school, emotion-wise. Not the teachers, not the principal, not the kids. There was nothing, because I had already had my biggest trauma. It was the death of my father. So anything else, like fighting or being called fatso, or that was nothing, guys. It was absolutely nothing. The trauma of losing my father and grandfather, it was so much that that's all I focused on. But what it did is it actually aligned me on a path that has led me to my journey today, my studying in ufology and in astronomy and everything I've learned. Maybe it's because when my father died, told me he was going to be on a star. For me, star people is something that exists. I have so much to say. So let's go over to the story. Now, I'm 19 years old. With a friend, we find this area in the woods where there's antique cars buried. I mean, it was incredible. In history, in Valleyfield, where I am, there was no information about that area having been a dump or anything. But then I fell upon something that was actually a military, probably partly a military base. And this is real. And we're walking in through the trail, and we start seeing all these pieces of cars coming up, and old lights and old wheels with white walls on it. And I said, wow. To my friend, we started, digging around a little bit with our feet and hands a bit. It started to rain. And when it started to rain, there was a guy walking down the path. I paid not much attention to him. But when he came by, directly aligned with us, and not staring at us, but he looked at us. He knew we were scrummaging around. I was thinking maybe, something was, we're going to get in trouble or something. We're still kids, 19, and the older guy was going by. I think he had a cold cigar or a cigarette or something in his mouth. Little, I think he had a dog. I'm almost starting to forget. He turns around, looks up at the trees and smoking a cigarette under the trees. I guess he's waiting right under the leaves till it stops raining, because it just started raining all of a sudden. It wasn't raining that hard, so we continued digging around and scrummaging around, and he's looking up. I mean, this old guy is looking up with white hair at the stars in the middle of the day. There were no stars, but he was looking up through the trees. Why am I saying stars? Is because that's what he talked about. And he said, "You like the stars? You into it? You into stars?" And then I turned around and I said, yeah, for sure. I think pretty much everyone is, probably. I said, I believe there's people up there on the stars. And I was thinking back at the same time as my father said, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe I hadn't even thought of it at that time. It was just a quick answer. He immediately answered me that if I tried to tell somebody that there were people on the stars, they're not going to believe me. But he didn't say it that way. He said, when you tell the people that there's people up there in the stars, they're not going to believe you. And I'm only thinking about that today because I get chills thinking that 27 years later, 25 years later, I wind up working on a medical bus, moved out in the boonies, new town, and I start filming the skies because it was so dark where I was. It was just fields and farm fields, and I started the research channel. But this guy that I met in the woods, that I have no idea why, he was looking up into the trees in the middle of the afternoon, probably about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he says, "So you like stars, eh?" Oh, I said right off the bat, he must be sick in the head or something. I didn't even speak to him. I said, yeah, I love the stars. And I said, I believe there's people up there in the stars, and I'd go up with the UFO to visit them, He says, well, no one's going to believe you when you tell them. And he's looking up at the sky, and what are you guys doing? Oh, we found some old cars here. We're not going to damage anything. We're just curious about what type of cars that were there. So we're scrummaging around sort of in the dirt. And you know what he said? Ooh, this is funny. You know what he said? Curious people who look for things, find things. It was incredible now that I think of it. When you search, you find. He said, so you're curious. I said, oh yeah. Like most people, I guess, about the stars, and a whole bunch of stuff. I said, we're looking up the history of Valleyfield, and we found out this was an old military base. And when we came here, we found all these old Coke bottles and the green bottles, and I'm explaining to him that I'm into antiques and I like old stuff, ancient things. I like old things and mysterious things, right? So I'm having this conversation with this guy, and I asked him, I said, "You from around here, sir?" He says, "Yep, I live around here." And he left after the rain stopped, and he went back into the woods. Listen, there's nothing in the woods. Either one of his houses still could have been at the end, and maybe he cut across his land to go into the field. I don't know. There's no cars there or parking or any houses. It's by the water, by rapids, actually. That area is exactly beside the dams in Valleyfield, the big dams. So a lot of energy there. But the conversation that was brought up about the stars and about me being curious, and that if ever I told anybody about stars that nobody would believe me, it was not necessarily a prediction, but in a way, don't you all feel that sometimes we meet people for certain reasons, that it's not for nothing? If you're like me, I believe every single person in my life that I've ever met, both the ones that I've loved, hated, and misunderstood, are all there to teach me something. I have to learn from that. Everyone's so curious about where humans are from and where aliens are hiding. It all started here on Earth. Story, myth, truth or not, about Atlantis, whether it be on the moon or on Earth or both, the star people are real, and they come to Earth. They have come to Earth in the past to help us evolve, is what I believe. And everything that we dig up on archaeological sites and in archaeology, we find objects that are far more advanced than our own time, than our own technology, and still yet not understood. Many objects, a computer from ancient Greece, a watch, and an ancient Egyptian sarcophage. It's all real. Giant skeleton bones. Woof. I mean, you have to wonder. You have to wonder if this could be possible. The aliens created us, is what I believe. They evolve our DNA. I'm still trying to understand whether the government is with or against them. We know they're against us. And why? Why do they need us so much? Never understood that. Why do they need us sitting here paying taxes and bills when they don't even need us or our money? There's a reason for that. Like there's a reason for the experimentation, both on elements, humans, animals. People say they get abducted by extraterrestrials. Have you ever been abducted? I have. But I didn't even know it, because the star people made me believe it was my father coming to see me. But maybe it was. But I did have a connection with my father, and I still do. And I learned things both by my family relatives that died, and also quite a few friends that I was able to tell them exactly messages from their deceased relatives, and without me even having to think of it, like it wasn't my own thoughts. I've seen so many things, and you can probably tell by seeing me jump into star stories and portals, but DNA and aliens. And I woke up quite a while ago, and when I woke up, I wasn't able to explain what I was understanding. The same way I wasn't able to explain the surface of the moon when I found the structures. I had to understand myself and create words that, because there's no terms for the things that we're seeing on the moon. And they're, like the UFOs that I film and the unidentified aerial phenomena. Before even ever any of us heard unidentified aerial phenomena, sure some of you remember, I've always said that UFOs have different characteristics. They're not all the same. Some may be a craft, but in general, it's the lights that we're seeing. Me, in my life, it's the lights. I've seen both lights in the sky, and I've seen them in my house beside me. 4.5 years old, living with my mother. My father's alive. 2 years before my father will pass away, approximately, and grandfather, I told my mother that I would go downstairs to see my grandmother. At that time, I lived over my grandmother. We're in an apartment. My mother was young. I was 4.5 years old. My father was working. My brother wasn't yet there. And I told her that I'd go downstairs to see my grandmother. She goes, no, you didn't. Like, I literally told her, like, last night, Mom, I went downstairs to see Grandma. And, of course, an adult, my mother, was like, no, you didn't leave. The door's locked. You can't open the door. He's 4.5 years old. And I said, I didn't go through the door. I told this to my mother. I wish I could have her on as in an interview to be able to talk to her. If there weren't so many trolls trying to locate my family, I keep her safe because I love her. So I told her I went down to my grandmother's, and she says, how? And I said, on my back. I'd go through my bed. The feeling of me going through my bed, I remember so well that I felt like a trap door had opened underneath me, and that I felt the pull. Listen to what I'm saying. I felt the pull of gravity pulling me downwards, but yet I didn't fall. But still the feeling like I'm on the top of a tree, falling towards the ground extremely slowly, with my eyes closed, could see behind my head myself going downwards towards my grandmother's apartment underneath me, going through the floor, seeing through the floor, the darkness. The only thing I don't remember is if I was smelling. For some reason, I wanted to try to remember that, if I could smell something as I was astral traveling. And again, not knowing myself that I was astral traveling. It's pretty incredible. And I'd go downstairs, I'd float on my back downwards. And once I got downstairs, I would start moving across the apartment of my grandmother on my back, eyes closed, like I was in my bed, but yet knowing that I was going downstairs. I knew I was going downstairs. I knew I was doing this, and I told my mother I was doing this. And throughout the years, and of course, getting older, well, the spiritual encounters ramped themselves up. But there were several stages, because whoever they are, they're preparing me for something. When I was a child and I was communicated by a being or entity, let's say, ghost, spirit, whatever you want to call it, I do it every time. I name them all because I find they're all in the same boat right now. Maybe in the future we'll be able to differentiate and characterize each of them. But when I was younger, there was a lot of encounters, but it was an encounter for a child to understand. They weren't giving me messages about science. They weren't telling me that the future was going to have a drastic change. Of course not. But when I got older, and like now, the intuition, what I consider is intuition, it's actually sometimes a message I receive. Yeah, I receive messages from the air. Sounds crazy, but that's, without any scientific term or explanation, I can literally do that. And there's lots of things that evolve around the energy part that I would never dare bring up. It's like, I feel like I'm right back into the days where warlocks had their thumbs put in traps so that they weren't able to make signs and cause spells to occur. And I mean, we really are in the beginning of time. You know, humans' evolution, we're, I think, a long way off from being a perfect race. That's for sure. I think we can all agree on that. But the messages came in like that when I was younger, very slowly, telling me there was something on the other side. And that's all they wanted to show me, I think, is that we're here. You know, you're safe. We're going to protect you. Don't worry. Lost your dad. We're still here. We're watching over you. At 18 years old, I think of it right now, I could get a tear in my eye. It's like my father died. Hard to understand, eh? Let me explain. At 18 years old, that presence from my father that I always had beside me left. From 6.5 years old to when I was 18, for the first time, well, maybe not the first time I cried, but the first time I had a good cry about my dad, ever. Honestly. Whether it be because I put it back or not, I realized that he was gone. He had moved on to his next phase. It was no longer needed, that part of him, his essence, if you want, to help me manage my time alone here, because I never was alone. And at 18 years old, he disappeared. But it was incredible because I said, wow, I don't need him anymore to get ahead, and I know he loved me or whatever. I mean, you go through all these things. I mean, I'm 6.5 years old, right? When he died. And now when I think of my dad, well, it may be funny for some, but I'm thinking of a kid, 29 years old, 30 years old. So I'm 47. So I'm okay. I was able to get ahead. And after that, the messages started coming from, let's just say, people from the skies, whatever, heaven, stars, that were giving me messages on not only what was to come, but now of things that I should be doing. We have meanings for everything online, so people don't have to use their own minds to try to decipher a problem. You can go find the answer online. Use your own mind and your own common sense and judgment.